Hello and welcome, everybody. And welcome to Red Star Talks. I'm Roger McKenzie, and I am so delighted to have my friend and comrade Radhika Desai with us this evening. Welcome, Radhika.
Thanks so much, Roger. Always great to talk with you.
No, it's a pleasure's all mine. Before we get into my proper introduction and to say a little bit about what we're going to be talking about tonight, can I just say that this podcast is a joint venture between Red Star Media and Manifesto Press, and hopefully it's something that's going to grow and develop. But the way that it's going to grow and develop is if more people know about this podcast. So press that like button, please, and just subscribe to the podcast and let other people know, share it around, tell your friends and family all about this podcast. We want to make sure that some of the discussions that we're trying to have on this podcast are spread far and wide. This is not something where we're just going to have a chat and then nothing happens. The whole point of this podcast is to try and stimulate action, try and link theory to practice, and to try and get folks armed up and ready to do stuff. But I am so happy that Radhika is able to join us. Radhika is a professor at the Department of Political Studies at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada, and is the director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group, and so much more as well. She's the author of lots of stuff, but there's two books I particularly want to pick out, which I think are really, really important given all the stuff that's going on at the moment. One book from 1994, Intellectuals and Socialism, Social Democrats in the Labour Party in 1994, and something that I think needs to be widely read and widely understood, and we'll put a link to all of Radhika's writings in the show notes anyway. But there's a particular book from that's called the Geopolitical Economy after US Hegemony, Globalization, and Empire. And I think with everything that's going on today, then you'll see why I think that that's a particularly important book. But where I want to start is where we always start on this podcast, Radhika, and it's a little bit about you, really. So, how did you become an academic? Where are you from? What's your journey to academia?
Right. So in the beginning was the beginning. I'm originally from India. I grew up in a city called Baroda, and I did my schooling there as is normal for my people from my background. I went to what you'd call a public school, what the rest of the world would call a private school. I went to university. I did my first degree in Baroda, where there was a very good university of long standing, of course. With the arrival of the BJP in power, first in Gujarat, this is my home state, and then in the country, things have gone downhill since I went there, but I feel I've got a very good education there. And then I went for a variety of complex reasons to Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, in Canada, to pursue my MA and my PhD. So, and when I was there, I was very lucky in one sense, which is that when I was there was a certain group, like fairly substantial, about 4 or 5 or 6 people in the faculty who taught from a perspective that was either clearly Marxist, explicitly so, or at least very friendly to Marxism, so very open to Marxism. So that's where really, unlike, India has a communist party of long standing, and it has been politically as well as intellectually very important in India. But in my neck of the woods, I was not, a communist. In fact, I was very much a liberal as I was growing up. Both from the perspective of the education I got and from the perspective of my social background. But once I encountered Marxism, I kind of really felt that this was it. I guess my dominant thought, I remember thinking so clearly at that time as an undergraduate student, and then as a graduate student, I thought, well, these folks, these Marxists, are at least asking the most important questions. It doesn't matter if they get the answers wrong here and there, but the questions are so much more ambitious, so much more penetrating, so much more fundamental than anything liberal theory bothers to ask, that this is the way to go. So I kind of dove in the deep end, and I haven't surfaced since, or at least if I've surfaced, it was only for air, and I've dove right back in. And so I've kind of been in this. So my first work, in fact, was about UK politics. I did an MA thesis on Thatcherite think tanks in the UK, which was published as a long article in New Left Review much later, but it was. And then the book that you mentioned, Intellectuals and Socialism, was my PhD thesis. So I basically trained as somebody who focused on politics, party politics, the intellectual function in party politics, and so on. But from the beginning, the people who taught me, and partly because they were Marxists or Marxisants, shall we say, it was always like I never did politics as such. We always did political economy. It was always understanding the material, understanding politics in relation to the material basis of society. So anyway, so I continued that. And as I did so, I became one of the first critics I don't know, let me rephrase that. I don't want to make it sound like, I was just a student and then a very freshly minted professor, but I was always skeptical of the idea of globalization. So, and I criticized that because I felt that there were, the world was made up of a bunch of national economies. This idea that the world is flat, that national boundaries don't matter, there are no national economies, national governments don't matter, they can't do anything, it's complete rubbish. And so I was always critical of that. And then I went on to eventually that skepticism led me to write the other book you mentioned, Geopolitical Economy, which I feel is very foundational for me because I had always been interested. I mean, I initially was involved in the study of national politics of different parts of the world. I also, by the way, along the way, I began my study of Indian politics as well. But anyway, basically, from this point on, from my critique of globalization, I also became very interested in theories of international affairs and so on. So I also eventually came to write Geopolitical Economy, which began as a critique of globalization discourse, but eventually also in the end ended up being a critique of all the cosmopolitan discourses, as I call them, in international relations. And basically, nearly all the theories of international relations are cosmopolitan theories. And the one that isn't, namely so-called realist theory, focuses only on politics to the exclusion of economics. So that's and so I was writing this book, and it was nearly finished before I finally thought of a really good top title for it, which was Geopolitical Economy. And by that I was basically launching a call for a new way of understanding international affairs.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, thanks for that. I mean, one of the kind of big debates at the moment, and really the theme of the discussion tonight, is about this whole thing about the decline of the dollar, and whether that's just something those of us on the left have just kind of wishfully thinking is going to happen, or whether it's a real thing. I mean, when you look at that kind of dominance of the dollar, do you think it's waning? Do you think it's still this all dominant kind of power? That those of us who've got this kind of third world background or ancestry, if you like, have kind of been targeted by this, the power of the dollar. Do you think that there's anything in this about its decline, or is it still as strong as it ever was?
I think that, well, let me say a couple of prefatory things before we launch into this. I think that the vast majority of the people who are thinking about the end of the dollar system aren't necessarily leftists. In fact, most leftists, I would say, are still so still so enamored of globalization discourse, in part because they believe, falsely in my view, that Marx and Engels endorsed a version of globalization theory, which they did not. But nevertheless, I'll leave that aside. So a lot of leftists are actually maybe not you or me, but a lot of leftists are still, they don't really pay much attention to it. Bulk of those who are interested in the possibility of de-dollarization are people who are interested in the decline of the West and the US in particular, and of globalism and so on. And many of them tend to have relatively conservative social positions. So we have to be very careful of what all these constituencies are. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I'd make is that my argument, which began in Geopolitical Economy, although I had published versions of it in shorter articles before Geopolitical Economy was published in 2013. My argument is that the dollar has never been hegemonic. What we take to be the hegemony of the dollar, or the dollar's long innings as the world currency, has actually been a crisis-ridden affair. The imposition of the dollar on the world, which was the choice of the United Nations, of the United States, because they basically nixed every alternative that was proposed to the dollar at Bretton Woods, and therefore left the world with no choice but to use the dollar. This imposition has always been very problematic, because the United States was not capable, and could not possibly be capable, of running the world's currency for a number of reasons that we can discuss. So initially, they tried to sweeten the bitter pill for the rest of the world by saying that they would make the dollar convertible into gold. But that situation became increasingly unsustainable, and the dollar's gold link had to be broken in 1971. And since that time, what you've seen is that the dollar system has become reliant on a series of financial bubbles, vast expansions of financial activity, which create an artificial demand for the dollar, and therefore, keep money flowing into the dollar system, and therefore keep the thing going. But this has been the situation. So my point is not, so to me, the dollar system has been close to ending quite a few times. The only thing has been that there has been a further new expansion of financial activity. And by the way, these expansions of financial activity have been extremely costly to the world, because all of them end with a crash. You had the dot-com bubble crash, you had the housing and credit bubble crash. Now I would be very surprised if we are able to finish 2026 without some kind of crash in practically all the asset markets that are so heavily inflated right now. So that's my second point. And so the third point I'd make is that the end of the dollar system is not necessarily going to come as a result of various countries like China, Russia, whoever, all the countries that have been talking about de-dollarization, them taking a major initiative. Because probably with the exception of China, I would say that the elites of most, and possibly Russia, the elites of most other countries in the world are heavily invested in the dollar system because of these financial bubbles. Because basically these financial bubbles also make the dollar system as the main parking lot for the elites of the world to park their ill-gotten gains, away from what they regard as the dirty fingers of their governments be wanting to tax them or what have you. And I think that as long as these people have the capacity to hide their money there, the dollar system is relatively insulated. Although even that is not a complete. I think if we have a crash this year, as I feel that it's very likely, although I don't want to make any predictions, I'm just saying it's very likely because practically everybody is saying that there will be a crash. If there is a big crash, then I think that there will also be a crash of the dollar system, because the dollar system relies on the financial bubble. Anyway, so I would say that the crash may. So there are two scenarios. One is that these elites in the BRICS and other countries who still remain heavily invested in the dollar system, either they are removed from power, which would mean revolution in countries like Brazil, India, South Africa, etc., or there is such a big crash that there is nothing left of the dollar system. And at that point, the various countries of the world will be left scrambling to construct an alternative very hastily.
I mean, that's really helpful to me as somebody who's not an economist, is to try and understand those dynamics. So thank you for that. I mean, one of the things that I hear all the time is that, well, if you're not going to have a kind of new currency thing, which a lot of people kind of talk about, then what we are seeing, it seems to me, is a lot more of nations trading in their own currencies. So, for example, around oil, there seems to me to be a lot of trade taking place now. I think it was between India, I think, and China, maybe.
Russia, I think you're thinking of India and Russia.
Russia. Right. Okay. And that kind of exchange in terms of trade in their own currencies. I mean, do you think that's either an alternative or something that will continue? That trend will continue to take place, where instead of trying to go through this mechanism of creating a new currency, that actually people will prioritize trading in their own economies, in their own currencies.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think you raise a very important question. So let me first of all say that the idea, I mean, part of the reason why everybody seems to think that the dollar system is unproblematic is that there is a false idea that that has been pushed down our gullets for decades. And that is that the currency of the most powerful country in the world is bound to be the currency of the world. So when people look for alternatives to the dollar, they usually light on, is it going to be the yuan or, the renminbi? Will it be the euro, etc., etc.? But the currency of any one country, and even the euro, which is the currency of, say, another fairly large entity, but not much larger than the United States, that they, but also with deep structural problems and so on in the euro's case. But anyway, the point is that there is absolutely nothing natural about the currency of any one country being the world's currency. So that's the first one. Secondly, then, yes, it is true. You're absolutely right that there have in the recent past, partly because of the weaponization of the dollar system, partly because of the extra uncertainties introduced into the dollar system by the Trump administration, administrations, I should say. Yes, there has been a proliferation of agreements between countries to use each other's currencies. Now, this is all very well if trade between the two countries concerned is relatively balanced.
Yeah,
but the moment you have substantial imbalances, then you have a problem. So the rupee-ruble trade is an excellent example. India would like to buy lots more from Russia, particularly in the form of oil, than Russia wants to buy from India. So while Russia may say that it is going to accept rupees, and India may say that it is going to accept rubles, India is sitting pretty because all the rubles it can earn, it is happy to spend in Russia further. So, but India does not earn a lot of rubles, and what few rubles it earns, it has plenty of opportunity to spend in Russia. But Russia is in the opposite position. It earns a lot of rupees, but the amount of goods and services in value terms that it wishes to import from India are very few. So Russia is ending up with a vast pile of rupees it cannot use. And it's not obviously very happy about it. So in that sense, there is an inherent limitation to this bilateral solution. And that's why, for me, it's very important to go back to the proposals that Keynes had made back in 1944 when he was part of the British delegation at Bretton Woods, because basically he proposed a scheme in which there would be a currency that would be created, which would not be used by you and me to buy an ice cream cone or a shirt or a bicycle or whatever. It would only be used between central banks to settle imbalances. So if one country exported more to another country than it imported, then at the end of certain period, whether it's a week, a month, a year, it doesn't matter, there will be a clearing, and what imbalance remained would be settled with Bangkok. Because you only need money when there are imbalances. If you if you sell to me goods worth £100 and I sell to you a good worth £100, then we don't need to exchange anything. The need for a currency is only if there is an imbalance. Okay. So he said that. He also then put in a lot of other, shall we say, safeguards or rules which would actually keep trade relatively balanced between countries, which means that the need for this currency, which he called Bangkok, would be as little as possible. And he also did a couple of other things. He said that in order for this to work, there should not be persistent imbalances. See, right now, the dollar system requires, it's necessarily dependent on persistent imbalances. The imbalance takes the form of the trade deficits and current account deficits of the US. He said no. If there are any countries experiencing persistent imbalances, whether they are trade deficits or trade surpluses, both should be penalized. Because one country's trade deficit is another country's trade surplus. And you can't just penalize the deficit and not the surplus. So he created rules that would have penalized both. And he created rules that did not allow an accumulation of bancor on anyone's part. So that all of this would have had a very egalitarian and developmental effect on the world economy as a whole. For example, it would have, if Germany is running a trade surplus vis-a-vis Greece, this would have been disallowed in a way that it would have compelled Germany to invest in Greece in such a way that it increased Greece's capacity to export to Germany and thereby wiping out the imbalance, wiping out Germany's trade surplus. Because in any case, I mean, one can have a long discussion. I'm going on for too long, so I'll stop in a minute. But these are the most important things. I mean, therefore, to me, recalling the Keynes's arrangements and the principles on which he built it is important, because we need something like that. Obviously, we cannot, disinter it and bring it back holus bolus into the present world. We would have to adapt it, but the principles are the important ones. And so long as we follow those principles, that's what we need, basically.
I mean, one of the things that a few months ago, when Trump did his whole thing around tariffs and stuff. I mean, I doubt, as a non-economist, I doubt that I'm the only person around who's trying to work out, well, what does this actually mean? Well, what is there any kind of logic behind this? Because from the little bit that I understood, it made no bloody sense to me at all, because it seemed to me that people in the United States would actually pay for the, I just don't understand it. I mean, in terms of what you've just said, in terms of trade imbalances and so on, can you explain to me about where you think all of that, with the tariffs that Trump has imposed on the world, frankly, where all that's likely to lead us?
Yeah. So, you are asking a very big question. Okay. So I'm going to try and simplify and shorten it as much as I can. So let me say that first things first. So Tariffs in themselves are not a bad thing. Not in themselves. Historically, without tariffs, practically no country would have industrialized. Every country that has industrialized to up to today, so whether that is the UK, which began industrializing in the late 18th century, or the latter part of the 18th century, or the US, or South Korea, or China, or Germany, Japan, you name any successful industrializing country, they have had to use tariffs. Why? Because if your market is completely open, then the country that has industrialized before you, that is more competitive than you, will flood your markets. You will not, your own industries will not develop. Okay. So in themselves, tariffs are not bad. However, Trump's use of tariffs are pretty pathetic because the only reason he's imposing tariffs, actually, let me say that he's probably imposing tariffs for two reasons. Number one, because Trump has said he's going to make America great again, and he's going to make people's lives better and give them better jobs and bring back manufacturing and so on. But in reality, he has invoked all these themes only to get elected. And his purpose in getting elected is to serve the same corporate capitalist class, which has absolutely lost every productive bone it ever had in his body, like already going back, through in the decades of neoliberalism. So he has just used these instrumentally, and now he announced them with great fanfare, but actually, as people experts will tell you, he has not actually imposed as many tariffs as he announced on Liberation Day, and so on. Because for him, it's all a big show. It's all about making it look as if he's doing something for ordinary Americans. But do you think he cares a whit about the ordinary working American? He absolutely does not. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is that he has, of course, his real purpose is to liberate American capital, particularly the biggest, the highest levels or highest echelons of corporate capital from taxation. And so for him, these tariffs are also useful because they generate taxes. They generate revenues. So the tariff is a tax, and you're absolutely right. This tax is not paid by foreigners, as he claims. It is not paid by foreign companies. Yeah, maybe some of it may be absorbed by foreign companies, but overall, these tariffs are a tax on the American consumer who wishes to buy anything that is imported. And the final point is that Trump has justified his tariffs by saying that he's going to revitalize American industry. Now, while tariffs are necessary to doing this, they are not the sufficient condition for doing this. In addition to tariffs, you need an industrial strategy. And there is absolutely no sign that Trump has an industrial strategy. Because an industrial strategy requires that you must exert some control over the capitalists of your country. You should be able to say to them, okay, we will protect you for X number of years so long as you are able to deliver on these promises, etc. There's absolutely no indication that I have that Trump is able to impose such conditions on corporate capital, because like every politician in the United States, at the end of the day, he's reliant on corporate capital, not they on him. So there is no way that he can control corporate capital. So this is the very complex situation. So to come back to your main point, yes, I agree with Keynes that persistent trade surpluses and trade deficits are a bad thing. But Keynes never said that increased trade is a bad thing. In fact, trade can only increase on a sustainable basis provided it is balanced. Because if there's a great imbalance, if some countries are constantly running deficits and others are constantly running surpluses, then the only way the situation can be sustained is if in some way the deficit countries can borrow money from the surplus countries to buy the products of the surplus countries. But this process itself is unsustainable because at the end of the day, this money has to be paid back. And the countries that are borrowing do not have the productive capacity to pay back. So go figure. that's why you get crises like the Germany, Greece, and the Eurozone crises and so on. And that's partly why you have the current situation in which somebody like Trump gets elected and disrupts the world trade system, because the fact is that at the end of the day, the Americans, they can to some extent just keep giving IOUs to other people, but there's a limit to this process, and this limit is partly counteracted by creating this financialization and this artificial demand for dollars, so that other people around the world are lending the US money so that it can keep buying Chinese goods and other people's goods and so on. But that process has a limit, because the moment the bubble bursts, then the incentive for the rest of the world to lend the Americans money goes away.
I mean, you mentioned disruption in your comments then, which again, extremely helpful. I mean, one of the big disruptions of recent, days really, has been about the way that Trump ordered his troops into Venezuela and kidnapped the president, Nicolas Maduro. But on its own, that's bad enough. But it seems to me that this is part of something bigger. One of the things that I'm really impressed with your work around the geopolitical economy is it helps to provide us with a tool, framework for understanding what that is really all about. Can you say a few words about how you, from your perspective, see what's going on in terms of the way that this is portrayed as a quite openly as a kind of grab for oil of Venezuela and its vast oil resources, but also at the same time we're seeing talk about grabbing Greenland. We've seen the way that that Trump has launched an attack in Nigeria as well. So there seems to be something else taking place here. I mean, how do you see these latest developments?
Okay, so again, there's another huge...
Again, a big question.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. So, but let me try and break it down and at least give you some of the main elements
Sure.
of the answer. So the first is that, as I said earlier about tariffs, I mean, Trump goes on about tariffs, but actually he has not imposed the Liberation Day tariffs were like the tariffs that have been imposed are a fraction of what he announced on Liberation Day. So this is typical Trump, right? I mean, there's all this swagger and bravado and bombast about what he's going to do and what he has done, and how absolutely, if you saw that speech after after the kidnapping of President Maduro and his wife Celia Flores. If you saw that speech, it was absolutely chock-a-block full of superlatives. Like every other word was a superlative, right? So that's what because you see, to me, what it's really about is that what it's really about is the crisis that 4.5 decades of neoliberalism, soon to be 5 decades of neoliberalism, have cast the United States and the West in. Because it is only in the context of that crisis you can have somebody like Trump getting elected twice. Indeed, the fact that Trump got elected a second time means that the established political class, which was up to that point represented by the Biden types and so on, its capacity to win elections is exhausted. I mean, if the Democrats win again, it'll be because they have really changed their tune, that they have started singing a new tune, a sort of a Zohran Mamdani style tune, if they actually get elected and so on. But that's something we shall see, whether the Democrats have the gray cells to figure that out. We don't know yet. So, but Trump's numbers within less than a year of him being in office, despite all these shenanigans, this displays of I'm going to use ICE to terrorize people and use tariffs to terrorize nations and use bombings. He has bombed some 7-8 countries in the world already. This is your anti-war president. So how do we understand this? The way to understand this is that everything Trump does is a show. There has been no invasion of Venezuela. Indeed, I don't know if you know this, but here in London, there's one sort of story that just flashed past and really caught my eye, is that there is some betting agency that is being, that has put a lot of punters' noses out of joint, because everybody who bet on whether Trump would invade Venezuela now wants to collect their winnings because he has gone in and kidnapped Maduro. But the betting agency is saying, no, this is not an invasion. So they are refusing to pay. So there you go. Now, to come back to my point, this is not an invasion.
Before you go on, I find it quite remarkable that people are able to bet on invading another country.
Well,
I think that's remarkable.
This is the betting culture. It's not something I'm personally part of, but it is, the fact is Trump had been amassing troops and his military assets in the Caribbean. He has been concentrating American military assets in the region. So quite frankly, I wouldn't blame a lot of people for betting that he would invade. That's what he made it look like. So naturally, some people at least followed his lead. But it was all a show. And what he has done is he had this little sneak kind of kidnapping, which is, is essentially a sneaky kidnapping. He's trying to portray it as a great military victory. Why? Because his polling numbers are absolutely going, to the bottom. And he's got to do something. This is a midterm election year. And so that's what he's doing. You mentioned oil. In what possible sense can this be about oil? In order for this to be about oil, you have to have a bunch of American big oil giants willing to invest in Venezuela. None of them are. None of them are unless Trump gives them security guarantees and financial guarantees. And there is absolutely no indication that Trump has the capacity or the willingness to do this. So again, and then, other people, to me, and as some other people said, it's red meat for Marco Rubio, who's been kind of panting for something like this, all year. So maybe, there's an element of that, but that's not ultimately it either. Ultimately, it's another stunt to make it look as if Trump is, looking after American interests. Is our oil. I mean, it was never your oil, Donald, But nevertheless, he'd like to say that so that he can show that he has gone and done something really great. I mean, as I say, how many people are going to believe that sneaky kidnapping amounts to a great military victory? This is complete rubbish. But this is the kind of world of smoke and mirrors that Trump has not created. He is a creature of that. This is how he must behave. And so, to me, the real story is not, and everybody's talking about Trump is breaking international law. I mean, Biden broke international law loads of times. Obama broke international law loads of times. I mean, every president of the neoliberal era, if not before, has been breaking international law. Let's not even go there. I think Trump is doing it with greater relish because he basically has this America First principle so that it serves him to do so. This whole, what is it? People have this expression that is going around, saying the quiet part out loud. Well, that's because he is structurally required to do so. It is not some urge to honesty or even some urge to boast that gets Trump to do this. It is because he must do it, because he is riding two horses. One is the electoral horse where he needs to get people to vote for him, and the other is the horse which is to serve the same corporate elite that Biden or Obama or Clinton or Reagan ever served. in that sense, he's no different, except that the two horses are going in different directions, and he has to somehow keep them together. But his ability to do so ultimately will be exhausted. We are already seeing the exhaustion in the poll numbers. He's trying to do what he can. So it's not about, it's not even about hating the Bolivarian regime. You saw how he made nice with Zoran Mamdani, saying, you can call me a fascist if you like, whatever. I think that he's to me, he's not even ideological in that sense. He's all about making it look as if he's sufficiently successful to win the next one. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's. I think that's a really helpful analysis. I've written a piece that came out in yesterday's Morning Star, which basically made the point that it might be what Trump is doing with Venezuela may well be about imperialism and all of this and the grab for oil and all of that. But also, I think people forget that we're actually dealing with a criminal enterprise in the White House as well. I mean, they are crooks, and they behave like the mafia because that's where they see their ability to be able to make money. And I think that I also take the view that I do think it's about drugs, but I don't think it's about Maduro being a drug dealer. I think it's about what the CIA and the US government has done for many decades now, and that is their quest to have control over the drug industry, which I think is what they've been doing for a long time, and flooding particularly Black communities as well in the US with their narcotics. So I think there's that element to it as well. But I think your analysis is really thought-provoking, Radhika, in terms of the way that we really must cut through some of the bullshit, frankly, and really just understand about this showman, what is actually really all about. And for me, what he's always been about is making loads of money for himself personally and
look,
his family.
You are so right. Now, I would say a couple of things. Number one, yes, of course, Trump is a crook, but wasn't Biden a crook?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the American, I would say the American ruling class. I mean, compared to people like Trump or Clinton, President Nixon looks practically like a upstanding, pillar of the community. Because they were not corrupt in the personal sense. They had at least some sense of a moral vision. But I think under neoliberalism, all these so-called politicians, they are all just corrupt in the worst sense. So I think that so I don't at all deny the truth of what you're saying. I'm just saying that it's not so exceptional. As for the drug trade, I would probably say that you know better than me. I mean, I'm not followed the drug trade other than to note that there is, even, one of the delights of living in our time, of course, is that there are so many members of the establishment, including the media establishment, who hate Trump, that they are spilling the beans on Trump. As well. So, even stalwarts of the mainstream media like the FT and the Guardian are noting that there is absolutely no evidence that President Maduro was running any kind of drug cartel, or even no evidence that drugs were coming from Venezuela. Yes, they may be coming from elsewhere in Latin America, but that's... Secondly, of course, the war against drugs has always been a way to essentially get American, I guess if not troops, at least law enforcement people into other countries like Mexico or Colombia or wherever it may be. So, I mean, I would just go with what you say. But as far as the, the Trump family, now again, this is partly saying the quiet part out loud. But again, Trump does that because he has sold himself as a great businessman to the people who have voted for him. So he wants to look like he's a great businessman by making more money while he's in the White House. And showing that he has done so. So he does this in a relatively showy way. And, he launches his own Bitcoin and his wife's Bitcoin and what have you. I mean, this is, and his, practically, yeah. But having said that, I also say one final thing before I stop. And that is, he likes to think of himself as somebody who can make a deal. His book, which I'm afraid I haven't read, called The Art of the
No
Deal.
way.
I mean, why should I waste my time reading such books?
Exactly.
Anyway, did he even write it? But anyway, the point is that what I do know is that he wishes to be seen as somebody who can negotiate and come to an agreement. But if you look at all the times that he's tried to do a deal, it's just absolute mess. In his first administration, he tried to do a deal with Kim Jong-un and so on. And even then, he was angling for the Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't get it. He didn't get it this year. God knows if he'll ever get it. And if he gets it, it's because of the sheer corruption of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, which can give the prize to an outstanding warmonger like, what's her name? Machado, Maria, no, what is it called? Anyway, Corina Machado, whatever her name, first name is. So the point is that, Trump is all about creating an image out of nothing. He's not even a good negotiator. He's not even a good businessman. So practically every pretense on which he has entered the White House is wrong. That's the only part, the part which he's not saying out loud, no matter how much else he may be saying out loud, the part he's not saying out loud is that what he's really there for is to serve the same American corporate capitalist class as all his predecessors have done, with one tiny difference. He serves the most maverick cowboy fringe of that capitalist class with a little more devotion than his predecessors have done.
Exactly. Well, that's a good place to kind of bring the discussion to a close. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, I mean, what sort of stuff are you working on at the moment that you want to share with people?
Oh gosh, what am I working?
Because I see on your website that you're not just working on one book, but there's like 2 books or something.
Oh,
at least 2 books that you're working on.
If I actually, and that's an old list, I should actually update it. And I don't think I should put anything about the web books I'm working on, but I am actually working on a lot of different things. So one is I'm working on more output around the dollar system and why it's not working and what we can expect and so on. Another theme is, I keep writing on and off about Indian politics, and I've likened in my work the Modi government to fascism, which is something that, some people do. I'm not alone, but a lot of people resist. So there's that. I'm also sort of elaborating more on my work on geopolitical economy, particularly as it relates to the US, and its function in the world economy and so on. So and also, I keep being asked to write shorter things. So I'm perhaps, I'll be writing some. I always. I'm elaborating more stuff on the theory of imperialism, Rosa Luxemburg, in relation to Rosa Luxemburg, in relation to Lenin, in relation to Hilferding. So I'm just doing a lot of different things, I guess.
Excellent. And where can people follow your work?
Okay. Yes. Well, I have this website, which you are talking about, which is at radhikadesai.com, and it's actually in the process of being updated. So, by all means, please visit it now and maybe in a week or 2 from now. But there should be a new version of the website, a more up-to-date version up there soon. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And I've just recently started a Substack column, and I'm going to start a YouTube channel. So watch out for all of those things.
Excellent, Radhika. Thank you so much. That's been a real joy and really helpful for me in terms of my thinking about where we are and the challenges that we face. As always, a complete joy talking with you. Can I just broadly, in bringing the discussion to a close, can I just say to everybody who's watching this, please do follow Radhika's work. It's really, really important stuff, and it really does help us to get a better understanding of the challenges that we face. All of the information are from about Radhika and where you can contact her is going to be in the show notes. All the details of how you can contact Manifesto Press will also be in the notes, as will the details for Red Star Media, and how to contact me and to follow my work at the Morning Star newspaper. If you don't buy the Morning Star, if you're not subscribed to the Morning Star, I don't know what's wrong with you. Where are you? What are you doing with your life? You are missing out massively. And the details for the Morning Star are also will be in the show notes as well. But the main thing is, I've said it before, press that like button if you haven't done so, but also subscribe to this podcast and let other people know about it as well. We want to spread the word so that we can have many more of these sorts of discussions. So thank you all so much. The point that I made at the beginning is a very real and serious one. This isn't just about me being able to invite loads of people that I admire and look up to and, think of as fantastic people and friends and comrades, just to have a nice chat with. This is about spurring us all on to doing something practical to bring about real change, because we can all see how desperately needed that change is at the moment. But change will not take place just because we wish it. It'll take place because we make it happen. So thanks again to everybody for watching this podcast, and look forward to the next one when I'll announce in a couple of weeks who our next special guest is going to be. But it is somebody who I think you will all love to want to listen to as well. So thanks very much. Thanks, Radhika, again. Thank you. Rochelle. No, it's been a complete honor, mate, to have you on here. And thank you to Rochelle, our producer from Manifesto Press. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Good luck. Solidarity to you all.
Bye-bye.